Welcome back to my channel. Thank you again for joining me for another recap of the trial against Derek Chauvin. Today we're going to get into the testimony that we heard day 3. I'll walk you through each of those testimonies and some of the different things that we learned, some of the surprising information that was discovered and uncovered during that testimony, and again we'll end with some takeaways from the day. So let's get into the first witness that we heard from today. It was a 19-year-old male who was actually 18 at the time. So because he was 18, obviously legal, he was actually on the witness stand today. So during his testimony, we learned that he, while he worked at Cup Foods full-time, he also lived in an apartment above the establishment. And that it was really just a normal day for him. He was working a shift, I believe he said, from like 4 to close, which was 4 to 8 that day. And so we got today there was a lot of footage that we got to see that had not previously been seen. Obviously, this was footage that was body cam footage. This was footage that was taken from other surveillance in the community, in the area, other businesses. And so we got to see multiple points of view. Just before he unfortunately was murdered, we got to see that he was walking around, talking, laughing, engaging with friends and people at the store just as anyone else would. And so I thought about the family a lot today, much like yesterday, but even more so today because there was so much unseen footage that I'm not sure, given that they, hired attorneys and that sort of thing, have already seen this. But to the public, a lot of this was unseen and very, very difficult to consume all in a day. And so when we saw this surveillance of George Floyd in the store interacting with the young man that was testifying, he was actually the person who took the counterfeit $20 bill, the fake $20 bill from George Floyd. And prior to that, again, much like the off-duty firefighter and the girl who was just going to the store with her cousin to get snacks, it was just a regular day. Like, as I was watching it, I found myself kind of smiling because the guys that were working in the store behind the counter, they were like goofing off and joking, and you could see that they were like just kind of playing. But clearly we're working at a place that they enjoyed and had friends at, which is important as a young person. I think that you will work most of your adult life, most of us, and many of us don't have the privilege and aren't afforded the opportunity to work jobs that we love, that, give back to us in a personal way and, give us some level of intrinsic value. And so as a young person, I think it's really, really important that when you do work that you, even if it's a job that's laborsome or a job that you don't necessarily like the work that you do, that at least you can do it with people that you like. When I was growing up, I did retail. And so, if you're going to do retail, work somewhere where the manager's cool and, lets you try on clothes when the store closes, and, y'all turn on your own music when you start, cleaning up and that sort of thing. Like, so it really did just look like he was having a regular day with his coworkers at work, of course, before the violence began to take place. But so he actually had a conversation with George Floyd. He was the first person to speak to the drug use and the idea that George Floyd was high or possibly high prior to this encounter. He spoke to, I think, slurring his words while they were trying to have a conversation about sports or something like that. But did speak to the fact that, he carried on with normal conversation, and that when he took the $20 bill, he knew that, I guess upon examination, he knew that it was counterfeit, and then he began to kind of wrestle in his mind. He spoke to whether or not to take it, because the policy for the store was if you take counterfeit bills, then that comes out of your paycheck. And so this is an 18-year-old child, really boy, that is working a full-time job, and I'm going to assume that any 18-year-old child that's working a full-time job needs to be working a full-time job. And so when faced with the opportunity, or faced with the situation of, do I give $20 of my own money or take this counterfeit 20 from someone else, I understand how that can be difficult for a young person. And it feels like a very unfair policy to the workers of their store. And while it is unfair, it is also against the Minnesota labor laws, to which has been disputed, of course, by Cup Foods, and said that it is not their policy, and that is only if they do not examine, to which I don't think it matters whether they examine or not. They shouldn't be held liable for a person that's coming in and using a counterfeit bill, period. So he is... said at one point, he was just going to take it and, decided that he was going to pay for it, which is ultimately he took it, and then immediately began, like, as I said, wrestle. Went and told the manager. The manager then told him to, go out, speak with him, have him come in so that they could talk. I, in particular, aside from the testimony, thought this was a problem. If you're the manager, this is an 18-year-old child, that's your job. Like, when situations get elevated, that's when a manager steps in. At no point was a person in a store that I was in shoplifting and a manager told me, you go after them. We actually had a policy that you don't go after people when they're shoplifting, for the particular reason that one day girl thought she was going to be, Billy Badass and, uncovered some $5 tank tops and went out there in the parking lot, got that ass punched. So after that, our policy changed. And so I just didn't think it was fair that he sent him out there in the first place. But he went out, had a conversation about him coming in. He would not. He spoke to in that conversation. He didn't really say much to him. He was mainly speaking to the driver on the passenger side, and then he went to the passenger side primarily because oncoming traffic was coming. If he would have went on the driver's side, so it would be safe, he went on the other side. And that he goes in, tells his manager that they won't come in, and then his manager sends them back out, and then he goes out with two other workers that looked very, very young, around his age. I actually think one of them he mentioned was younger than him, and so they go out, but I think one of them was related to the manager of the store, possibly. So they go out, have a conversation. They don't want to come back in. He also mentioned during this time that his demeanor, he kind of threw his hands up, kind of to express or to say, like, why is this happening, kind of thing. And he spoke to the idea that the friend who came in the store with George Floyd, who you can see on the surveillance, seemed kind of shifty. I think maybe he spoke to, I also watched a little bit of analysts about this today, so I don't want to confuse the testimony and the analysts that I kind of heard from today on MSNBC. So he said that he does not believe, he doesn't think that George Floyd knew that the bill was counterfeit. And so once they go back in, because they do not decide to come in and speak with the manager, it's at that point that someone then decides to call the police. And the last part about his testimony that I'll mention, much like yesterday. So he, unlike the next witness that we'll talk about, he was cross-examined from the defense, and one of the last questions that he asked him, again, much like the last question that he asked the girl that was so incredibly frustrating, he said something to the effect of, and after, the police left and paramedics, that sort of thing, and you went back to work, just, joking and laughing, playing with your coworkers. And it was like, no, bitch, I didn't. To which he just kind of responded, yeah, yes, but no, like, I just saw the police murder a man for, okay, so this is one of the distinctions I didn't make yesterday. Initially we thought that he kneeled on his neck for, it would be 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and we now know that was more like 9 minutes and I believe 23 seconds or 36 seconds. I apologize, I don't remember the exact, but that it was much longer than we in fact thought initially. And so it was like, no, I had to go back to work and finish my shift because the store was still open and shit, it still had to be done, and like I was on the clock, yeah, but like to suggest that like I just went back and had a normal day because this shit was normal, and the way he kind of built that up is because in his written testimony to investigators in the subsequent days after, he mentioned that was a hot block, and he asked him, I think, what does that mean, and he said, things would frequently happen, on that block, whatever. And then he asked him, and then you just went back to work and, went back to playing and joking and having a good time with your friends. And it was like, yeah, but no, that's not what happened. Like, fuck no, you have to be crazy to think and believe that he went back to work and just had a normal day. So So that was the first witness. The second witness that we heard from was a man who was having a normal day. He was getting, again, just of course, everyone in the neighborhood having a normal day, kind of walking us through that experience. He was getting food with his fiance from Cup Foods when he was parked behind George Floyd and saw the police officers immediately approach the vehicle with their guns drawn, and he, pulled out his phone and immediately began recording. So this was very, very early. I think like maybe question 4 in his testimony, and he tries to kind of answer the question, and because the prosecution asked him, why did you pull out your phone to record? And he said he started with, well, where I'm from. And the judge, the court stepped in and, told him that he can't use past memories. And it was like, that's not actually what's happening. Again, this is, a way in which Black people, I'll say, speak. And he wasn't trying to recount a memory. He was literally suggesting, and he went on to say that when a police arrives or, with a Black person, you pull out your phone and you record. That's what you do. Like, it felt like, especially with when we think back to the testimony yesterday from the younger girl who pulled out her phone, like she made sure that her young cousin got to safety, but pulled out her phone because she wanted to make sure that she was capturing this. And it felt like he was saying, like, there's this collective social responsibility that we feel that when these things happen, that you can't move on about your day, because this could potentially be a situation where, had it not been for your footage, right, this police officer wouldn't even stand trial. Let's not say get away, because we know that happens, but wouldn't even have the opportunity, the family, to see an officer stand trial in an attempt to get justice. And so he mentioned that, he pulled it out because that's what you do. Much like the girl, the boy also, because they've lived in an apartment above Cup Foods, you see him on video at one point take a phone call. And he said that he was calling his mom because he was telling her, don't come downstairs. Because if she would have come downstairs where the doorway would have led, it would have been exactly, like literally, probably she would have walked right into his face, into the pavement. And so he called to make sure that his mom did not come down and witness what was happening. Again, just this multiple level of responsibility and critical thinking and figuring how to maneuver through a situation while also trying to advocate for somebody. Just seeing regular, everyday 17-year-old, 18-year-olds do this, but the police for some reason could not do this. Also, in the normalcy of seeing this and feeling this level of social responsibility, because you almost get the impression that he did this very instinctively, but also the normalcy of, that this can happen to you, around you, you feel that, and so you do carry on normal. One of the videos that they showed, I thought it was interesting that it was no audio, even though there was audio present on the video, because they were having a private conversation that had nothing to do with the video while recording recording the beginning parts of what we now know will be a murder. So in his video, because a lot of what we saw in this video today, again, the moments leading up to, we can see him handcuffed on the ground. We can see them talking to him. He mentioned that when they had him handcuffed and he thought they were putting him in the car, ultimately he stopped recording and he left because he, thought that things were fine. Before he stopped recording, there was another point where he stopped and had a good view of them with George Floyd sitting down on the concrete. He stopped recording, and he mentioned that he stopped recording because the officer was looking at him, and he said, like, I don't want no problems. I didn't want no problems. And I wish there would have been a follow-up question to, what do you mean by not wanting any problems? Because that was intimidation. Whoever that officer was, whichever of the four, he didn't speak to the fact that it was Chauvin. It doesn't matter. He didn't speak to it being him, but we know that there is intimidation with people, and we know that there's violence against people who attempt to document these things that happen, which is why I thought there was so much heroism in what that 17-year-old girl did, because whereas this man thought things were over and he could leave and that was fine, she knew things weren't, and she saw that a man was dying, and she continued to record, even though that meant that she could be in grave danger. The third witness was a 61-year-old man who had not been educated past the third grade, and he lived near Cup Foods, was driving by, and was very honest and said, quite frankly, he stopped because he lived in the neighborhood, saw the police with a man, and he stopped and he wanted to see what was going on because he knows it. He lived there, he wanted to see what was going on. I thought that was cute, because when we think about these neighborhoods, and you know a person, that one person in the neighborhood, usually an elder, who's just nosy, who knows everything that's going on, who know everybody in the neighborhood, which we'll learn that he actually had a conversation with the officer, Derek, had a conversation with him 5 days prior. Again, a man in the community, in the neighborhood, very talkative and very nosy, obviously. But he started it from the point that Floyd was being removed from the truck, and that's where he kind of walked up, and he actually began to have a conversation with George Floyd, because he saw what was happening, and he did not want bringing into the idea of his age, I think, and really, I think, an idea of respectability politics that I think a lot of us, especially in our generation, millennials, have broken down. There's no level of respectability politics that will keep you safe. There are no level of respectability politics that will allow them to see you as human and want to not take your life. And so the man was really, I got from his testimony, he was saying to George Floyd, like, you can't win, just get up and get in the car. Really trying to, he said, wanting to help, what did he say, make it easy. And that's the idea, right? That if you would just wear the right clothes, if you would say the right thing, if you would press your hair good enough, right, then you would make that experience with these people, with systematic oppression and racism and all these different things, you would make it easy. But it doesn't, in fact, make it easy. It makes it so much harder for you to not only deal with your real identity, but it doesn't actually save you. And so then when you have those experiences, it's very gut-wrenching and it's very hard. Especially because there's a level of guilt, because that level of guilt, I think, was a part that you got from everybody involved, that there was a level of guilt because everybody wanted to do something, was trying to do something. Literally everybody involved was trying to do something and wanted to do something but him. So that's what he said, wanting to do. And so a lot of this footage was very, very hard to see. Like, my heart was racing while watching this, and there were actually parts that we didn't get to see at all because it was too graphic, and parts that I didn't listen to at all because, again, I don't want to hear a grown man cry out for his mama while dying. But I do know some of the things that he said, of course, from reading some transcript, and then the 61-year-old gentleman that testified mentioned some of the things that he said. So as George Floyd is being put into the car, he's actually having a conversation with him, and he's telling him some of the things that he is saying is, I can't breathe, I'm claustrophobic, I have anxiety, and he's telling him just get in the car, and at a point, you hear George Floyd say, I'll get on the ground, I'll do whatever, and then the video we no longer see, but we continue to hear the audio, and this is when he's crying out for his mother, and he's weeping, and he's gasping and all of those different things. And when we cut back to the witness on the stand, he is shaken, he is sobbing, he is weeping. I mean, he is distraught to the point that the court actually has to take a 10-minute recess just so that he can kind of get himself together, because they were trying and he could not. It was so heartbreaking to watch this testimony today. So some of the things that he was saying: I can't breathe, mama, they killing me, my body is shutting down, tell my kids I love her, or I love a name, tell her I love her. He tells him to just get up in the car, get up and get in the car, after he says my body is shutting down, and George Floyd responds and says I can't. He said that he was foaming at the mouth, and he asked them if they could get off of him, to which they didn't respond. And the part that was also difficult as you hear this audio from the video is that George Floyd knew that he was going to die. In fact, in the footage, the body cam that we saw, you could hear him say, like, don't shoot me. He was afraid. He was actually terrified. He looked terrified. That piece I did watch. He looked terrified of this encounter that he was having with the police. And so crying out for his dead mother, I have no doubt in my mind that he absolutely knew that he was going to die. And so thinking about being a person who lost a dad in a really horrific car accident on impact, that was one of the things that I learned. Like, it was on impact, and some part of that, people want to make it easier for you to take in, and in some ways it does make it easier, because when you have to then listen to a man being killed, knowing that he's being killed, it's like, yeah, it was hard. So that man then stayed and was a part of the crowd, went on to have a conversation with Derek Chauvin after, because in that conversation that he had with him 5 days prior, he said, I want you to get home safe, and we want, other people to get home safe too. And I think that he said he may have referred to him as a maggot, and that he didn't respect what he did that day, and still a 61-year-old man in all that he had and all that he had experienced, said that, get home safe, and we want others to as well. And it was like, but everybody didn't get home safe though. Everybody didn't get home safe. So in the last testimony, we heard from an IT specialist who come up with the ranks of like 30 years of experience in the police force, and who now works in like the strategic communications department over IT, working with the body cams, working with all of their equipment that police officers use, as well as their data and that sort of thing. As you can imagine, the data that a police department might collect. So he's over and in charge of all of those things and the moving parts and how they work. And so really during his testimony, there was I don't feel like a lot of questioning, but there was a lot. And this is, again, day 3 was tough, because because of the work he did, we got to see so many different points and angles of the interaction with the police. And so there was a lot of that we didn't see because it was too graphic, and a lot of which I didn't actually hear myself again, because I don't do that, but did read in a transcript and read later. And so in the video, we got to see the 2 people. This was the first time that we really got a good look at the other 2 people that were in the vehicle with him. He was not alone at the time. If I didn't mention that while talking about the first witness, because that's what we learned, that he was in the car with a gentleman and another young lady. And so we get to see their interaction, and they speak to the fact that they said, why is he acting like that? Is he on something? Like, no, he, he's scared. He's been shot before, which that can then be corroborated by George Floyd, who in one of the videos and body cam footage that we were seeing, he said, like, I've been shot before, don't shoot me, that sort of thing. So we got a lot of audio from that, a lot of the different things that he was saying while pleading for his life. I don't want no problems, I'm not a bad guy, please don't shoot me, I'm scared as fuck. So literally, again, a man who was afraid and pleading for his life and knew he was going to die, and there was nothing that he or a paramedic or an EMT or off-duty firefighter or 61-year-old man or 17-year-old or anybody else could do to stop it. It was also very difficult to hear some of the officers speak, because there was a point where one of the officers, Lane, asked about rolling him over and shot because of noticing that he was in distress, and Chauvin said, no, that they weren't going to move him. And then there was another point where he even spoke to something about his state. And I don't remember if it was unconscious. It wasn't unconscious, but he spoke to the state that he was in, to which Chauvin again did nothing. So it was clear in that audio that we got from these different vantage points from this last witness that Lane, at least, so we'll see what happens with his case, but Lane at least knew and spoke to the fact that something was wrong, something's going on, should we move him? And spoke to the state that he was in. So that's a lot of what we got from that last testimony. So takeaways from the day. I'll start with some of my takeaways from the prosecution. So again, I thought that they did just a very, very good job of laying out from the different vantage points of the different witnesses, using the storytelling to paint the picture of a man who, while may not have been acting in the most perfect way and wasn't doing the perfect things, was not violent. Everyone spoke to that. Was not a person that was presenting a threat. They all spoke to that. And that he was a person that they all witnessed who was in distress and needed help, to which they asked, and the officers did not respond to that. They also all spoke to the fact of knowing that he was dead. And this will come up when we talk in day 4. Because I've already began to kind of put those notes together. But as we talk through day 4, you'll begin to understand just how many people knew that he was dead, while the officers claimed to be so distracted they didn't know that they were kneeling on a dead man. Again, going back, I thought the prosecution did a very good job of just pointing out how the violence that they were afraid that they were going to encounter from this man, not only did they not encounter that, but it did not match the level of force that was being used. So for the defense, today I thought some of the information that was being presented was the evidence in the different body cam footage and that sort of thing was corroborating the fact that he was on something, which isn't surprising as it knew that was actually being presented by the very first witness today in the prosecution. They brought that out themselves, but that there were multiple points where they mentioned that there was something going on and that he was on something from an officer and saying something. There were a couple of different points. So on audio, we can hear Lane speak to one of those officers speaking to him being on something. When he was crying out, Chauvin mentioned that he was on something, they have to subdue him, that sort of thing. And then again, we hear some dash cam footage of a conversation that I mentioned that the old man had with Chauvin after the incident occurred. And you can hear Chauvin say, like, they had to do something, a man his size, that sort of thing. He was clearly on something. So that was corroborated in some of the footage that we got to see today. And then lastly, I'll say, because I did get to see some of the coverage on MSNBC, so I got to hear a little bit about what was going on inside the courtroom today. So because of COVID, it's not like a regular courtroom where you could have multiple people there from the family and that sort of thing, supportive and representing. Only person from the Floyd family that is there is his brother, that you guys, if you've seen any of the coverage on television, you've probably seen him speak for the family. But that today, actually, a juror left with a stress-related reaction, as they called it, the court called it, and that when she returned, the reporter said that she was shaking. She actually spoke to being shaky but better when the judge asked her how she was feeling, and that said that she was having trouble sleeping, had been up since 2 a.m., and that the court said that they would be making a record specifically of that and her condition and what took place. So I thought that was interesting. They did say the jurors were very intently taking notes today. There were certain parts of videos where all of them stopped taking notes and kind of look up and all stared intently at the video that they were being presented with. There were points where people were gasping on the jury and putting their hands in their head. So a lot happening with the jury stand, and they seem to be really, really impacted by the testimony, being impacted by the video that they're seeing today. If you're interested in this shirt, it's from my friend Harold. He has a t-shirt company. I will link that information down below. So again, thank you for joining me for this very, very lengthy video. I'm sorry, I'm really gonna get it together and get this under like a reasonable time. But there's like so much happening. But I'll be recapping day 4 and 5 together, because day 5 will be a short day. So look for that. I believe Friday I'll be bringing that to you. So again, thank you so much for watching, and let's continue these conversations down below.